Hey, it's Sam, and I'm making this video about the new moon that's happening on October 30th. It's actually the new moon that's also called Diwali, which is the festival of light in Indian folklore. This new moon in particular is celebrated as a celebration of Lord Rama's re-entrance into the city that he ruled over and his re-establishment on the throne. Long story, in the epic, the Ramayana, the King Lord Rama was removed from his throne and exiled, and then his wife was stolen, and it was this whole drama. Well, after he emerged victorious, there was a celebration called Diwali, and it happened, and it's celebrated on the new moon that happens in October, usually each year. And this new moon is happening on October 30th. Now, interestingly, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we celebrate this new moon as Diwali. At least I'm going to offer my explanation, and then talk about this one in particular. But I also will be doing a forecast for all 12 signs, including yours, for those who want to be a member at my member site. So you can go ahead and register for that if you're not a member. And you'll get that and a lot of other excellent gifts, so check that out. So the story of Diwali is Lord Rama and Sita come back after losing the throne and the struggle to get it. They come back, and what happened is, because it was a very dark night when they returned, the villagers lined the streets with little lamps, Deepa. It's why we call Diwali, but it's also Deepavali. Deepa is the lamp that you see in Indian ceremonies, the little lamps. That's called a Deepa, or a light, and the little container that holds the light. So they lined the streets with these lights so that Rama and Sita could see their way back to the throne. And that happened on this new moon. This is when we celebrate Diwali. So why astronomically or astrologically would it be this new moon? Now, bear in mind, these aren't things that are said in the scriptures. They just say, this is the day you celebrate Diwali. And again, like everything in Indian cosmology, it's related to the astronomy and, of course, therefore, the astrology. Now, we know the astronomy, but we don't, you see, the astronomy is just the planetary configurations. We know that that's the day to celebrate it, but the astrology part, the mystical, the metaphysical part, the interpretive part, is what an astrologer does. Any astronomer can know that it's the new moon, that this new moon is when you do the celebration. But then an astrologer who hopefully understands what the sun and the moon mean, why it's the new moon in Libra, what the nakshatras are, what the stories are of this section of the zodiac, that's what makes it rich. So that's what I'm going to interpret a little bit here. So my feeling is the reason we celebrate this one is because it's actually the new moon when the sun and moon are both at their weakest at the same time. It's actually a time when both the sun is weak, because the sun is actually in its sign of debilitation. The sun is actually in Libra now. So we feel a sort of lessening of the fire of individuality and separateness, and in a good way. That sun is that sort of power within us to shine and radiate. When the sun is in Libra, that's at its lowest. So the sun is at its weakest, and then the moon, also on Diwali, on that day, the sun also has two pretty stressful conditions. First of all, it's dark, because anytime the moon is new, the moon is dark. When the moon is full, it's bright. So new moons and full moons work in a pattern. We had the full moon at the end of Pisces, early Aries a couple weeks ago. Now we have the new moon in Libra for this Diwali. But so the moon, when it's dark, it's one of the weaker conditions of the moon. And it's also very close to Scorpio, where the moon is debilitated. So the moon is also in its debilitated state, or very close to it, when we have this new moon day. So the sun is debilitated in Libra, and the moon is very close to its debilitated placement in Scorpio. So both of the lights, or the luminaries, the sun, which is the king of the day, and the moon, which is the queen of the night, are at their weakest on this day. And the only other time that the moon is weaker is when we have the new moon in Scorpio, because then it's dark and it's debilitated, which will be next month. But then the sun won't be debilitated, the sun will be in Scorpio. So my feeling is that the reason we celebrate the return of the light on this day is because it's the day when the light is naturally weakest. When the light is so strong, we don't have to celebrate the return of the light. We don't have to intentionally remember it, because the sun is already radiantly bright and it's already really strong. So when you think about the story of Diwali, the villagers intentionally put light out. They intentionally took the light in their Deepa lamp and lit it and used it as a pathway to the throne, because it was very dark. So it's actually quite a dark time. Diwali is a dark time where we need to intentionally light that lamp and intentionally create that flame within our heart, within our mind, with our spiritual practice, with our sadhana, and illuminate that path, hopefully together, because it's also a very communal celebration. It's actually considered New Year. It's in certain states, and in certain ways it's also considered the New Year. And it's a cultural touchstone, not just a spiritual one, meaning it's a time for the culture to come together and collectively pave the way, light the way toward a reestablishment of dharma and truth. Because that's what the celebration represents. Rama and Sita coming back to the kingdom is actually a representation of the righteousness being restored and dharma being restored. So may that be a potent metaphor for these times we live in this current political season and all the divisiveness. May we take this lesson of Diwali and this great metaphor of collectively and culturally lighting with, intentionally lighting a way for the establishment of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, which is Lord Rama and Lord Sita, to be on the throne. Because again, understand this as well. Rama and Sita are incarnations of the sun and the moon. So when you get into astrological metaphor, or even astronomical metaphor, the astrology behind it makes perfect sense. Rama is literally, in the Vishnu avatar scheme, Lord Rama was the incarnation of the sun. The sun is actually an incarnation of Lord Rama. Krishna is an incarnation of the moon, but as it relates to this story, his wife Sita is the moon. And there's enormous symbolism in the Ramayana that has to do with the sun and the moon. And then there's the dark king Ravana, who is related to Saturn. And then you have Hanuman, the hero of the Ramayana, is related to Mars. And just to show you how this astronomy and astrology plays out in this section of the zodiac, you have especially as it's portrayed in the nakshatras, you see a lot of this this scheme. In particular, you have the planet Saturn is at its highest exaltation point at the very end of the nakshatra that's called Swati. So right at the first degree of Vishaka is the highest exaltation point of Saturn. So Saturn is very strong here and the Sun is very weak. So this actually shows where Saturn, or Ravana, in the Ramayana is very strong. He's very strong in Libra, and as I already said, the Sun is very weak. And what happened in the story is Hanuman, who is related to Mars, actually defeated Ravana and his army, which is basically Mars defeating Saturn in this section of the zodiac, because this nakshatra, where as Saturn is culminating toward its highest exaltation, it's the nakshatra of Swati, which is related to Hanuman, the monkey god, and it's ruled by his father, who's called Vayu. So there's an enormous amount of symbolism in this section of the sky, especially with the nakshatras, that plays out almost directly in the Ramayana. So again, in order to reestablish that truth and purpose, which is related to the sun, we need to intentionally set forth those lamps after Hanuman, or Vayu, or prana and power defeat the obstacles that hold us back and our fears. Then we can be reestablished in dharma and purpose very easily. So that story of the Ramayana is very potent now, and it starts this new moon in Libra, which is a 30-day cycle for our relationships and really measuring how we interact with others. And again, just even think about the nature of the sun. The sun is the glory of our individuality. It's actually at its weakest in Libra, because we tend to then turn over our power to others and feel our own individuality to be quite weak. So it's actually a good time for service, sacrifice, compromise, accommodation for the next 30 days or so. But we may feel that our own individuality is much less potent, and that can also mean that we feel a little bit more tired. We feel, if we have a difficult time compromising with others and we really like to assert our individuality, it's often hard when the sun goes into Libra, because we're actually being really challenged to yield to another person's wishes. So for the next 30 days, that'll be an important lesson for us all. And this is happening, Mercury is also there, joined the sun. In fact, Mercury is very close to the sun. It's what's called combust. Mercury is, behind the sun, which brings about a lot of potential for intelligence and wisdom, especially in Libra. So we can have a good dialogue with others, especially as we try to figure things out and find the right words to speak and communicate with them. But again, we may find ourselves more in the service of other people's agendas, or at least it feels like that. So you'd want to be aware of that for the next 30 days or so, or at least the next couple weeks as Mercury gets through Libra. But then it goes into Scorpio. One of the big changes that we've had is recently is Venus has gone into Scorpio with Saturn, which is definitely much heavier than it was the previous several weeks when Venus went through Libra. Now that Venus is in Scorpio, the sort of backdrop of this new moon, which is in Libra, is also with a lot more intensity. You see, it's very important to look at the rulers of things. So having that sun and moon come together in Libra, also with Mercury, you have to look at the ruler of Libra, which is Venus. So the backdrop of this new moon in Libra and this sort of quest to reestablish light and truth, the sort of backdrop of that is a sort of intensity and a kind of even what might be called sort of paranoia in some ways, where we have a lot of imagined fears and might distort them a little bit more than normal because Venus is in Scorpio. And it's also with Saturn, where then we might want to isolate ourselves or try to control situations. So this is a strong backdrop as well right now to what's happening on this new moon in Libra, as we try to establish our individuality and compromise because it's Libra. Those things are very potent backdrops. In addition, Mars is in Sagittarius, where it's has a lot of courage, and it's fighting for the righteous cause. So there's certainly quite a lot of things that show us motivated and inspired by our work, and those things and those situations and environments where we can get in there and fight for what we believe in, especially with Mars in Sagittarius and the planets in Scorpio, which is also kind of a fighting spirit. Jupiter is also still in Virgo, so it's good for learning and being inspired by all of the details, and even being inspired by maybe organizing and arranging things and cleaning things and getting bringing order and harmony into your life and world. Jupiter in Virgo has been quite good for that. So these are a few other things that are just sort of happening. But mainly I want to talk about Diwali, Festival of Light, new moon in Libra, where we're working with this self and other cycle for the next 30 days. And if you want to know how this will impact you for the next 30 days, and you're not a member of my member site, very easy to join, only 50 cents, 2 weeks of daily forecast before you decide to stay a member or not, and also a lot of classes. Click the link and check it out. Have a lot of people are members, and I also have 2 weekly check-in calls that are live check-in calls with me on Facebook. So there's a lot of staying in touch with the astrology when you become a member. So